All right. So we've talked about the antebellum South, talked about the enslaved experience. We are going to look at the breaking point, according to some historians. Maybe not necessarily me, but according to some. The presidential election of 1860. Now we know from our mapping that a lot of the middle of the country is still unorganized territory. We have California and Oregon over on the West Coast. We've got Texas, which we stole from the Mexicans, and the rest of it is empty. Not empty. I shouldn't say empty. There's a lot of indigenous people there that we've already sent there. But in terms of cities and states, it's unorganized. And then we've got Kansas and Nebraska, that whole situation. But most of the population is still east of the Mississippi. And we have a big election in 1860. We've got our tall friend from Illinois, Abraham Lincoln, who's going to run as a Republican. We've got another man from Illinois, a short king, if you will, Stephen Douglas. Is he really that short? I don't know, but he was shorter than Abraham Lincoln. He is going to run as a Northern Democrat. We've also got Breckinridge, who's running as a Southern Democrat. And we've got Bell, who's running for the Constitutional Union Party. Now, if we've learned anything, is that you don't split the votes, right? Because anytime you split the votes, you lose. And we read the Lincoln-Douglas debates. We know that Douglas is having a hard time getting people on board with his Freeport Doctrine, which is going to be a problem during the election. So it's Lincoln versus Douglas versus Breckinridge versus Bell, right? Okay. And the center of this election is obviously sectionalist politics and the expansion of enslavement. We know that there is no argument on the table from Abraham Lincoln or Stephen Douglas to completely abolish slavery outright. It is to abolish the expansion of slavery into this territory. So we've got the Dred Scott decision that was passed down by Chief Justice Robert Taney, who said that enslaved people are property and you can do whatever you want with them. And we've got the Freeport Doctrine, which is Stephen Douglas's idea that he announces in Freeport, Illinois, which is why it's called the Freeport Doctrine, that popular sovereignty should be allowed for every state to determine enslaved status or not. If you want to be enslaved, you vote on it. If you don't want to be enslaved, you vote on it. And you can go back and forth. And you can vote one way or the other, possibly endlessly. I got to be honest, I didn't read the Freeport Doctrine in full, so maybe there is a timeline there. But I would imagine that if you can vote one way or the other, you could constantly bring this back up through Congress of your state. I don't know about that, but anyways, we also know that the Dred Scott decision overrules the Freeport Doctrine. Anyways, it says popular sovereignty is not allowed because Congress doesn't have the ability to make any laws about enslavement in the states. It's up to the states. So we've got this sectional divide. We also have John Brown, who has gone on this raid of Harper's Ferry, but we will talk about that in a different video, so stay tuned. In 1860, the Democratic National Convention meets in South Carolina, and it doesn't go well. Jefferson Davis is there. He wants to obviously protect enslavement, and the Northern delegates who are also there have voted down his cries to protect enslavement. So we see the party split. So later on in Baltimore, the Democrats bring forth Stephen Douglas as the Northern Democrat and Breckinridge as the Southern Democrat. This breaks the Democratic vote in two. You've got 2 versus 1 now. This is going to give the Republican Party the advantage. Even if Abraham Lincoln wasn't that popular, you're not splitting the votes between two people. So we have Lincoln, Douglas, Breckinridge, and then Bell. Nobody's really going for Bell, but we got to throw him in there because he was there. Let's talk about him, right? Again, Lincoln is put up by the Republicans, the former Whigs, and all of that stuff. They are a group of pro-unionists. A lot of them are from border states that, right, they don't agree with Lincoln, but they certainly don't agree with the Democrats. So they form the Constitutional Union Party, and they put up John Bell. They're really just trying to prevent Lincoln from winning. They're trying to split the vote from Lincoln, but it doesn't really work. I assume you would know that we don't have a President Bell. We do have a President Lincoln. And they both, the two big candidates, Douglas and Lincoln, address enslavement as often as they can in their debates. There's a big, the Illinois debates of Lincoln and Douglas are huge. And both of them have things to say about enslavement. Douglas says it matters not what way the Supreme Court may hereafter decide as to the abstract question whether slavery may or may not go into a territory under the Constitution. The people have the lawful means to introduce it or exclude it as they please. Again, that's the Freeport Doctrine right there. Lincoln says a house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall. But I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other. Either the opponents of slavery will arrest the further spread of it and place it where public mind shall rest in the belief that it is the course of ultimate extinction, or its advocates will push it forward till it shall become alike lawful in all the states, old as well as new, north as well as south. He never says he wants to get rid of it. He's trying to win an election, right? He wants the votes. He has this lovely House Divided speech that everybody's like, oh my gosh, what a guy. Yes, great guy in some forms. But this House Divided speech is not one of those things that makes him anti-slavery, pro-abolitionist. He very clearly tells us he does not take a side. That's what Stephen Douglas was pointing out during those debates, right? Lincoln doesn't take a side. He says what he wants people to hear. And we know that that's a point of contention with Douglas and Lincoln. But we also know that the Democratic vote is split, and by the time the election rolls around, Lincoln has won the election. He wins slightly more than 40% of the popular vote. He wins every northern state except New Jersey. But it is important to note that he's not even on the ballot in the southern states. The southern states have blocked him from being on the ballot, and he still manages to win. That's a big deal. That means that more people voted for him. And again, because the Democratic Party is split, that probably had a big thing to do with it. But he wins. He wins the majority in the Electoral College, and the Southern Democrats refuse to accept the result. And sometimes you hear these people referred to as the fire eaters. They're fired up. They're angry. This is like unheard of. He's not even on our ballot. How could he possibly have won? We do not accept these results. He's not our president, right? And this is where we get the secession. South Carolina is the first to go. South Carolina says, I cannot be a part of this country anymore. Not with this man in charge. This government is corrupt. I am out. I am leaving. And South Carolina encourages the other southern states to follow. So they will eventually. A lot of the southern states are concerned with Lincoln. They are worried about more events like John Brown's raid happening. They are worried that they will be assaulted in their homes. And they are just worried. In the words of Mary Boykin Chestnut, now that the black radical Republicans have the power, I suppose they will brown us all. It is an issue of how white people will be treated in regards to enslavement when they secede. And it is an issue of being allowed to keep people in enslavement. And that is where the secession comes from. And this is going to bring us to this new country called the Confederate States, where they are going to fight the Union to maintain their own freedom, whereas the Union does not believe, under Abraham Lincoln, that they have ever left. Abraham Lincoln still sees them as part of the Union. So his point in the war is to unify the country again, because he doesn't want to recognize that they are not part of the country. And with the next one, we'll get into the details of the war, but we said APUSH in under 10 minutes, and we're coming up on that mark. So we're going to end the election of 1860. Lincoln wins. Everybody else loses. Civil War.